So especially for those who are not familiar with the story, fascinating story, by the way, of David Marquet and his crew, I give you just a very short introduction. David Marquet was serving in the US Navy for over 17 years, expecting to be one day a captain. That's quite obvious. And finally, he got the letter from the headquarters informing that he will be the captain of the submarine USS Olympia. But first, he had to go for a one-year training just to know specificity of the strategic and operational of the ship. So when the training was almost over, the second letter came from the command of the US Navy informing him that he will be a captain, but will take over a command on not on the Olympia, but on the Santa Fe. So two problems show up. First, that the technical specification of those ships, submarines were different. So they were quite different. And the second, that the Santa Fe was rather on the low level of ranking. They have this yearly ranking of different crews. But there was no choice. So David took over the command. And we had a mixture of captain who is not knowing specificity of the submarine and the crew who is ready to blindly follow the orders of the captain, like in the system command control, which was kind of a standard before David's on the submarine. Therefore, traditional leadership, when captain is giving orders and the crew has to follow them, had to be changed. So David changed totally the way he was managing the Santa Fe. I have no time to tell you how he will do it. We will discuss about it. But for those who are especially first time hear the story, I'm very strongly recommending you the book, Turn the Ship Around, when David described in all details what he did, what was his new way of leadership. This book, by the way, was recognized as a #1 mastering book by USA Today and put in the top best business books of all time. We have for Polish leaders, Polish version of this book, which was edited together with Marcin OSM Power and the company For Results. And also, second book showed up last year. This was the original title, Leadership is the Language, when David gives some more hints, some more details, how he was managing the crew. And good news is that this book will be soon translated into Polish. That's for the Polish readers, good information. And again, will be edited by OSM Power and with support of For Results. So today I have a pleasure also to welcome owner of OSM Power, Marcin Osman. Hi, Marcin.
Hey.
By the way, for those who have gallery view. So tell us when the book can be edited in Polish language.
Now we're working on the book. We need around 3 to 4 months to be able to publish and print the book for Polish readers. The book is amazing. It's the second part, actually, of the David story. The first one, Turn the Ship Around, Polish title, Zmień Kurs, is kind of introduction. And from my point of view, Leadership is Language is a much more deeper book for great leaders to come.
All right. I know you were having interviews, David, and I know that it was impactful for you. So what kind of a lesson did you get from knowing the whole story and editing the book? Did you transfer something in your business?
All the time I work on it to implement even more. For me, the most important and new thing was how to change from leader who is leading into the leader who is following. So how to make my employee, my team more powerful, how to give them more responsibility, and how to encourage them to take actions and make decisions by their own without me, looking at their hands and controlling them all the time. Because before I was kind of leader who was, leading, hey guys, follow me, I will show the direction. And now we transfer our team to the people who actually, they are leading me. The heads of departments are doing great work. My only job is don't interrupt don't break anything, and just look if everything is going in the right direction. So that's the lessons I'm taking all the time from David, because it's like an ended process. It works with me all the time, and it's such a great thing that we can meet together. I know some faces from this webinar, and I know that most of you are customers on OSM Power, and that they have already read the book Zmień Kurs. So that's a great information for me.
So the important role of leader: do not disturb the crew to follow the target. Yes, I also see known faces. Cannot really point out all of them. Hello, Emmanuel. Henry Stewart, by the way, who I hope, Henry, you will share a little bit later how the IBL impacted your business and your way of leading company. Hi, Beata. Hi, everyone. Daniela. Now it's time to thank you very much, Marcin. So we are looking very much for the Polish edition, for the Polish reader. It will be important. Your previous book, the previous book you edited, was quite sold in quite good circulations. And what is most important is inspiring to build the different type of leadership, which is very much requested by the new normality, new world. So thanks, Marcin, for being with us. And now I'd like to officially welcome our two guests, two officers from former David's crew on Santa Fe, Chuck Dunphy, Chief Operations Officer at the Turn Around with 20 years experience in US Navy. Chuck was on different levels of logistic on Santa Fe, and after retiring from the Navy, he joined the team Turn the Ship Around, continue to spread the message of intent-based leadership. So thank you, Chuck, for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Maciek.
And we have the second guest, Andy Warshik. Andy served in the Army 24 years and achieved the rank of Master Chief. And he was, before David, he was on Santa Fe some years, so he could experience different style of management, the command and control, I believe, previously, and then totally different, leader. So I am really curious to get, Andy, what was the difference and how you feel, what is your motivation under these two different type of command. Andy today is a global recognized speaker and trainer with a unique perspective to build the culture of leader, not a leader follower. So thank you, gentlemen, for accepting our invitation. And hello, Andy.
Hello, Maciek. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Before I give the microphone to our guests, I invite everyone to have a questions. If you have something to ask our guests, please put into the chat, and we will try to put them on the list to the answer. Okay, so I want to start from a very basic question. How did your adventure with submarine start? So did you dream as a child, I want to serve in the US Navy? Maybe I'll start from Chuck.
I guess my desire to be in the Navy started when I was in high school. So around grade 9, 10, 11, right around that time in the mid to late 80s is when Top Gun came out, which got a lot of us excited about the Navy. And then Hunt for Red October came out. So those movies really kind of, let me see what the Navy was like. And I really thought I wanted to be a part of that. So I started to pursue it after that.
I think we all watched Red October, some similar films. Not everybody was inspired to join the Army. And how was Andy in your case?
Yeah, my dad was a career sailor, so I spent my life growing up all over the world, watching my dad go to work. He was on aircraft carriers. And so when I decided that the Navy would be a good place for me to start, I chose submarines because my dad's younger brother had joined the Navy and started the submarine training program and didn't make it. And he's kind of the favorite son of the family. So I wanted to do something that nobody in our family had done before. And then I really fell in love with sonar and the equipment that I used on the submarine, and that's how I ended up there.
So you had like a fulfilled family mission to be a sailor.
Yeah, I think everybody in our family for about 3 generations now has served in some branch of the armed forces.
Okay. All right. And Andy, I know that you, before David joined Santa Fe, became a captain of Santa Fe, you were under different type of leadership. Could you tell us a little bit about your before David experience? How was it?
Yeah. So when David arrived on the submarine, I'd been in the Navy for 13 years, and I was actually done, disillusioned with Navy leadership, because most of the leaders that I had worked for up to that point, they used a 3-step leadership process. If things didn't go their way, they would yell at us, talk down to us, and curse at us. And that seemed to be Navy leadership, although it's not taught anywhere. And I went to numerous leadership schools. I'm a graduate of the Navy Senior Enlisted Academy. Nobody's taught that, but it seemed to be the easiest and most convenient way to achieve short-term results. And I was done. I was done being yelled at. I actually felt like I had some value, but that type of leadership, that top down, tell people what to do, yell at them, it wasn't working for me. So I was actually planning my departure from the Navy when David took command of the submarine.
Right. Did you have, Chuck, similar experience comparing your previous duty to the Santa Fe adventure with David?
Yeah, my previous ship, it was very much the same. It was very top down, very hierarchical, lots of yelling was involved if you weren't doing the right thing. And I'll be honest, as a very junior officer in the Navy, I thought that's what we were supposed to do. And I started to live that way. I started to do those things, and it never makes you feel good. You're not, when you start yelling and screaming. And so I was also getting a little disillusioned with the Navy, but I knew I had a few more years that I needed to serve. And so I had a little ways to go.
So I understood you both believe this is the normal way of commanding in the Army, especially when you have on a submarine nuclear power. And you might be a little bit surprised, especially in the beginning when David came, well, maybe not first few weeks, but then when he changed his style of management and he was not giving orders. I wonder whether you, having previous experience, maybe not having question mark, what is going on? Why he's not giving us order what to do? How did you feel, Andy?
Well, so the first thing that David did was he took the chiefs, the middle management, the group that I belong to, and he took us aside and told us that he wanted us to run the submarine, that he was going to make sure that if anything went wrong, he would take responsibility, but all we needed to focus on was running the submarine. And so we've heard that talk with every new boss. Every new boss I ever had told us the same thing, but none of them executed it. Mm-hmm. So we kind of had a little bet how long David would stick to that. But then when he actually started allowing us to do the jobs that we were trained for, I think many of us were surprised. The first time things went wrong and he did not go to the top-down approach that we expected, I think for many of us that was an eye-opener. But my aha moment was the second time it happened. The second time we made a mistake and he didn't go that yell at us, talk down to us. route, but instead took this approach of what can we learn from that? How do we get better at that? That was my aha moment. That's when I knew I was working for somebody different. And it was, I will tell you, just for me personally, I went from planning my way out of the Navy to I did another 11 years. I stayed for another 11 years to put into practice the things that I was learning from this leader. It was incredibly, incredibly powerful and incredibly liberating for me.
Yeah, so I understand that initially you believe, oh, okay, he's telling, but in fact, he will be the regular way of commanding. But then when second time I understand you made a mistake, he was not yelling, you started to believe maybe it's going to be true. So Chuck, tell us something more about the way he was taking care of the mistake you made. Because I believe when you started to yourself, what usually was directed from the top, you might have a mistake in the beginning. So tell us more how he was handling the mistake you made.
So it was never, I think he realized very early on, and we all learned very quickly that, you know, you learn more from your mistakes probably than your successes. When you have a success, you're very, you know, oh, I did it right. And there's no, you don't look back and see, how did we do that? But when you look at the errors that you make and you look back, the important thing that we did was to analyze those mistakes and not try and draw blame. That wasn't the major concern. The major concern was, how can we learn from that? And you did. And it's not to say that if you kept making the very same mistake over and over and over again, people weren't looking at you like, what's going on? But if you made a mistake and we learned from it and we got better, there was no recrimination. There was nobody looking at you like, you know, oh, that was silly, you shouldn't have done that. So that was really good. And for me, my experience on the Santa Fe, just a little different in the sense that when I came on board, it was a little bit after David had been there a while, and just the way people talked with each other and the way my team interacted with me was so different than what I was used to. Nobody was looking to me to have all the answers. It was just people were looking at me for clarity and what they were supposed to be doing. What's the goal for today? What's the goal for the week? And then we all managed the plan together to get there. So it was, both those experiences really changed the way I looked at leadership.
Right. I think Churchill said that nothing taught me more than my mistakes. So this is so important. Of course, mistakes are not good things on the way to accomplish mission. But on the other hand, if you are having psychological safety to allow potentially employees to make a mistake, to draw the conclusion and to change, that's probably the best way to learn. You also said about whether the leader should has all the answer today, what sometimes is expected in such an incredible VUCA world. It's very, very difficult, almost impossible. The leader has all the answers. And what the leader is doing is teaching by asking the questions. And by the way, about the questions, I have a film for you now. I want to show you. The film was, this is like a scene made by Sławek, Błaszczak, and myself. And I would like to ask you whether it's maybe reminding you something which took place on Santa Fe. Let me just put the film. And you can then comment it.
Ahoj, kapitanie.
A, cześć, John.
O, widzę, że pan kapitan tu jakieś poważne strategiczne plany snuje. Europa! Jak ja już dawno w Europie nie byłem, panie kapitanie.
Hiszpania.
Hiszpania, żegnajcie nam dziś hiszpańskie dziewczyny. No, moglibyśmy tak godzinami jak ze starych, dobrych czasów, panie kapitanie, ale w międzyczasie bardzo poważny dylemat tutaj mam. Przygotowuję kolację, taką z gatunku bardziej uroczystych, no i chciałem się poradzić pana kapitana, że pan kapitan może decyzję podjął. Biały ryż czy ciemny ryż?
A z czym go będziesz serwował?
Z indykiem, tak jak pan kapitan lubi.
A twoim zdaniem, co by było lepsze? Biały czy czarny?
Zwykle podaję z białym tego indyka, ale prawdę mówiąc, ja osobiście uważam, że ciemniejszy jest zdrowszy, lepszy, więcej błonnika, no tak lepiej się go trawi.
No a jak podajesz ten ryż z indykiem, to kiedy zostaje mniej resztek? Czy jak podajesz biały ryż, czy jak podajesz czarny?
Częściej z białym go podawałem, ale jak z czarnym, to mało zostaje. Tak jak sobie przypomnę, mało tego zostaje ryżu, tego ciemnego.
No to myślę, że już wiesz, jaki ryż podasz najbliższą niedzielę.
Ciemny ryż, panie kapitanie.
I następnym razem sam podejmie tę decyzję.
Tak jest. Jestem gotowy.
We had good time playing this role with Sławek. Even I have a question for you, Andy, Chuck. Did it remind you something maybe which took place on the Santa Fe?
Chuck, I'll let you go first on this one.
So yeah, and that was a really formative moment for that young sailor on the Santa Fe. I mean, he truly he had this question. The menu just said rice, and he didn't know which one to make, and he could have gone to several people very close to him and been like, "What should I do?" But he went straight up to the captain and said, "You know, which would you prefer?" And I always thought about it as it could have been David just could have answered the question, and the sailor would have gone about his day and been okay. He could have just brushed it off with, well, whatever, you decide, it's fine. And again, just brush it off and let it just go. But he really took the extra couple of moments to ask a few questions and say, well, I think you're the right person to do this. You know what the crew likes, what you served last time, how many leftovers were left last time. So you have a good idea of what people will like, what you're making. I think you're the right person to make this decision. And just those extra few moments that David took to probe that question and to probe that sailor, it really shocked that sailor into thinking, I have an impact on the crew. I can make this decision and I can do this. And from a submarine perspective, it wasn't a very hard decision. There was no wrong answer as far as David was concerned. But for this young sailor, he realized the effect that he had on the whole crew and the information that he had available to him. And it really made him think and expand the way he looked at his role on the submarine. His role was not just to listen to people and to take orders. His role was to actually engage his brain and to think about, how do I affect the crew and how do I answer questions? So it was really formative, and looking back on it, I just think it was a massive moment for that sailor and for me as well. I after I had heard about it, I was kind of blown away that was the way that was the course David took. So it was really powerful.
Right. When we recorded the film and we posted on the LinkedIn, there were some questions marked whether this really has happened. So thank you for confirming that something similar has happened. And I think it's happening everywhere in all our companies. Sometimes small decisions are really brought to the very high level. And what intent-based leadership is one of the principles is to bring decision to information, not information to decision. So this was really a great example, and I believe in real life we have those type of micromanagement. So I remember, as you said, Chuck, investing a little bit time, ask a few questions. You shouldn't more than probably 10 minutes this conversation took place. Then saying, okay, next time you have this capability to make a decision on your own, we are just getting rid of those micromanagement. So I love the, when I remember you said on one of the fighting meeting about the sense about this event. So we decided to play it. Would you like to add something, Chuck? Andy?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to witness David do this numerous times, and especially with Chuck's group and even with Chuck's predecessor. So it was a lot of fun. The powerful thing for me was this giving control to the people that were doing the job shifted the psychological ownership. That young cook that Chuck refers to, no longer did he look at his job as cooking what Chuck told him or cooking what the captain liked. He now owned that, and the psychological ownership rested on his shoulders. What it did to the group of the guys that were running the submarine, the chiefs, it forced us, well, forced sounds wrong, but there was this belief that we had to work together to do the right thing because we owned it now. It belonged to us. It wasn't David, the captain, giving the orders. It was us running the submarine and making sure that we were making the right decisions. Where in the past, when you're just told to do things, you just do what you were told. But now that we owned it, now that ownership had shifted to us, we now, I was talking to Chuck's team. I was talking to the engineering guys. I was talking to the navigation guys, making sure that what I intended to do fit with what they were doing. Chuck will probably chuckle at this one, but we would not want to run the submarine through a bunch of angles and dangles up and down, side to side, if he were baking during the time that his guys were baking for us, because then we'd end up with a cake that might look like this instead of flat. So those things we started doing without being told. We owned it now. The ownership rested on us. And for me, that was the most powerful thing.
Right. And this is very much related to the convincement of the leader that you have a capability to do the certain task. And if you don't, just to focus on building this capability, building this, you have the capability and clarity, right? So competences and clarity. And then when you build on these two elements, you can give the control. And it was done really perfect by David. I'm looking into the chat, and Henry said that maybe mistakes are good things. If we don't make mistakes, are we really innovating? I think it's just very, very good questions. Love this video. Thank you. We too. The question whether this video will be, this program, the webinar will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded on YouTube and you can have an access to it. Yeah, so, and there is what they say, it's okay to fail. They wraps up the whole dilemma whether mistakes are good or not. That's very much true. Let me go back to the first experience you had with David. I wonder if you may have a question mark in your head when he was changing the style, was not giving orders, was not deciding mostly, unless there was some small things. Did you maybe have a thought of maybe he's not a good leader, not ready to run serious things like a submarine with the nuclear power? Maybe he's not well prepared. Did you have this type of thoughts, especially in the beginning of the process? Maybe Chuck.
Well, I would say actually Andy's probably probably has a better perspective on this. As an officer, I was very much used to taking some amount of control. So I'll throw this one to Andy.
Andy, so what did you think? Tell us true.
So Maciek, I will tell you, the first time we went to sea with this brand new captain who had, who told us that we were going to run the submarine, and he gave an order that we couldn't execute. And I will tell you that, and I'm just going to speak to you from the chief's perspective, which there's about 20 on a submarine, about 20 chiefs, about 15 of the officers, and about 100 guys that do all the work. When that incident happened, we thought he was certifiably crazy and probably should not be in command. Because his solution to giving that order was that's the point when he told us he wasn't going to give orders. He told us he was out of the order giving business, and we thought he was crazy. We thought he was absolutely crazy, and this wouldn't work. That's why you have a captain, to give orders and to tell you what to do. And he told us that his solution was he was just going to share his intentions. He was going to tell us what he intended for us to do, what the Navy had intended for us to do, and it was up to us and our officers to share our intentions with him of how we were going to execute that. Now, I will tell you that in my group, there were about 4 or 5 guys, about 25% of us, that were just absolutely overjoyed that was the approach. Then there were probably another 10 to 20% that were like, this guy needs to be taken off this. He doesn't know what he's doing. This is never going to work. We're all going to die out here. And then there was that middle group that just watched to see what happened. And when the things like the psychological ownership shifting, this belief that we mattered and that our approach mattered, and our ability to go into the captain and tell him what we intended to do and explain to him why it was the right thing, the clarity, and explain to him how we were going to do it, the competence, and to be set free to do it. You know, in the book, the word empowerment is used, and I think Dr. Stephen Covey called us the most empowered organization he'd ever seen. In the Chiefs quarters, we never used the word empowerment. We used the word emancipation. That David emancipated us. He set us free to do our jobs, and that was incredibly powerful. There were learning steps, learning to express that competence and clarity or display it, because that's what we learned is there's only 2 ways that you know your team's competence and clarity. And one is observation. You watch your team, you know whether or not they know what they're doing, or you have a conversation about it. And so on a submarine, David can't be everywhere. Chuck couldn't be everywhere. I couldn't be everywhere. So you had to have these conversations. And these conversations were incredibly powerful because they weren't David saying, this is what you need to do. It wasn't Chuck telling his cooks, this is what you need to do. It was asking them about what they saw, what they thought, what they would like to do, what they intended to do. And when those questions came back with the correct approach, which there are multiple correct approaches, as Chuck alluded to before, and you knew that the person was competent and they understood the why, it was incredibly freeing. You know, Chuck could focus on the bigger picture of what needed to be done. I could focus on the bigger picture of what needed to be done in sonar. It was incredible, powerful experience for me.
I can imagine. And I also can imagine how difficult initially it could be for David, because he took the crew, which not necessarily was on the top of the ranking, right? Rather was a little bit lower. So
horrible, Maciek.
Horrible, if not say that sometimes you were the last one in the ranking. And he, despite of it, he trusts that you have a potential. And what he did, he didn't change you. By the way, he must not change anybody from the crew member. That was the condition. But he changed environment around you. And you suddenly, within 9 months, became crew number 1 in the US Navy, probably one of the best in the history ranking. So this was really amazing and showing the power of leadership when you are not changing necessarily people, but you of course, you you teach them, you coach them, but also changing the environment. We have very good questions in the chat. I look at the moment. So the question is, how long did it take to work in a new way for the whole crew? Could you please take the question?
Yeah. So for some things, it was almost immediate. For others, it took us time to see that others were going to do it. In fact, we made this rule on board the Santa Fe that we wouldn't use the word they when we referred to anybody else on the Santa Fe. No they on Santa Fe. And so again, from the Chiefs' perspective, we kind of laughed at that. We thought it was kind of a silly rule, but we were, whatever, if that's our rule, we're gonna lead by example. We'll do it. And like nothing happened for about 4 days. And about the 4th day after that, I was standing with our chief engineer, our engineering department master chief, and we were looking at a piece of equipment that the sailors were working on. And the engineer came up to the captain and he said to the captain, he said, "Captain, we don't have this fixed yet because," and he was about to say they haven't issued us our part yet. And that would have been Chuck's department. Chuck had the logistics. And he stopped himself and he said, "We haven't got the part yet," instead of "they haven't given us the part yet." And Mike was the master chief standing next to me. I looked at Mike looked at me, and we're like, well, if the officers are going to adhere to this rule, we'll adhere to the rule as well. So that was probably a pretty quick change. And I think for many of us, it was the second or third time David stuck to the chiefs in charge, sharing his intentions approach instead of what we used to refer to as punish hard, punish fast when a mistake was made. But in less than a year's time, we went from worst to first. And there's probably we were in a submarine, submerged 6 months, no interference from outside people. I think that made it a little bit faster. But it was pretty quick. The follow-on question to that is, what was the most difficult in the whole process? And the most difficult thing for me, and Chuck may have a different answer on that, was the team members that knew they could have control over their jobs, but refused to take the decision or exercise the control. And for me, that was incredibly difficult because I worked with the group that had the most submarine experience of the whole crew. The chiefs are 10, 15, sometimes even 20 plus years of experience of anybody on the submarine that should be comfortable taking control. It should be that group. We had more experience than the young officers. We had more experience than the sailors working for us. And those guys and this was their reason. They were, "Andy, I don't know why you're so happy about having control, because when you make a mistake, David's going to blame you and punish you," which is the opposite of what he said. So that was the hardest piece and the most difficult piece. And what we did with that group is, as long as they did the job per the job description, we kind of left them alone. As long as they weren't causing problems, we kind of left them alone. But the guys like Chuck's cook that he talked about, the core group of chiefs that worked really hard at it, we invested a lot of time in their growth and development. And that part was fun.
Before I ask the same question, Chuck, what was the most difficult for you? I have something I want to share with you, which can be maybe interesting for some of you. Company 4 Results have 2 offers for you. We would like to invite you for 2 types of events. The one event is especially for C-level manager. I see some of the C-level manager here in the audience. We would like to do 2 days workshop when we will ask or diagnose how much you are ready and what is the way to transfer this intent-based leadership. This intent-based leadership is exactly what David Marquet was doing on Santa Fe, this accountability culture that employees are taking responsibility for the job, and the decisions, it's shifted very much downward to the company. So the event starts from VR Dive. This is 2 days workshop, VR Dive. I can tell you, and David and Chuck can confirm, that this is the only one place in the world when we combine intent-based leadership and the VR Dive simulation. This VR Dive simulation was built in the cooperation, of course, with David, and very much simulating what was going on the Santa Fe. So you can really experience fantastic emotions and the skills of leadership. You can see how under stress, sometimes under shortage of time, you react as a leader. And in this package, you have also testimony. You can discuss with leaders who implemented already this culture in the company with fantastic results. So the workshop can be in Polish or in English. And by the way, the nearest date is 2nd and 3rd of March. Soon, the program is in partnership with intent-based leadership. Kazik, who is with us today, Kazimierz Żurek, will put into the chat link to the landing page for the event. If you are interested, please register. And the second offer we have is the 4 months program for owners, managers, leaders, HR business partners who want to implement similar culture in their organization. This is a little bit longer process. So it starts again with the kickoff session on the virtual reality. I know that some of you were going through it. Beata, for example, you went with your team. That is followed by 6 trainings online. Again, contact with leaders who implemented the culture, and in between sessions, actually task, in fact, to be done in between. There is a special platform promote. You can do, so it's like a 4 months program, and the nearest starts in March 2021. Again, with the partnership in partnership with intent-based leadership. The second event, the link to the second event registration will be put in the chat in a moment. And after this webinar, so after 15 minutes, more or less, we can stay a little bit for those who want to get some more details. Maybe you have some questions, we can clarify. But coming back, Chuck, what for you was the most difficult in this style of leadership?
From the officer perspective, it was probably similar to Andy's in the sense that trying to get, for me, it was trying to get the team to give their ideas. I think there was a lot of skepticism. There was a lot of fear, that psychological safety to understand that it's okay to give an idea. If we all talk about it together, we're all going to own it together. But to give that idea, to get that out of everybody. And I guess the other thing was, the teamwork perspective from just the whole crew. That whole we-they scenario really was impactful, and it really made me want to, instead of being very defensive about different things, it made me want to figure out, how do we work together? How do we work as a team? But that was a challenge for some people. It just wasn't the way that they had been brought up, and it was difficult for a fair number of people. So it was similar to Andy's, I think.
Right. I believe it was difficult. I could imagine we are not talking about business failure if something will go wrong. We are talking about risk for our life. So being on a submarine with a nuclear power, I can tell you I will be probably very much scared if I see such a big change of leadership. So glory for you. You were able to accept and to really take it up, and with fantastic results. I have a question from the chat. What did you do with the person? What did you do with the person which did not want to take decision because he or she has such a personality?
Well, I think as Andy said, it wasn't, you know, there was no mass turnover. We didn't fire people because that they weren't trying to do the same things. It was just you were kind of left behind. You weren't getting the same interactions from the rest of the crew if you weren't playing along. And I think it affected some people. I think there were some people that just wanted to leave and couldn't deal with it, and we did what they wanted. But for the most part, I would say, and especially from the younger crew, there was a lot of enthusiasm. I don't think there was any big push to get the younger crew to try to step up. I think that the push was almost from their perspective of, hey, I can do this. I want to give you my ideas. I want to talk to you and give you my thoughts. So from my perspective, there weren't a lot of people that weren't wanting to at least try this.
I think this
Andy?
is Andy.
Yeah. So David, when David was told to go down and fix the Santa Fe, his boss told him that he could fire whoever he needed to fire, and they would find a replacement. And I think one of the hindsight most powerful things for me is David fired nobody. The very same crew who had the worst reputation in the Pacific Fleet in 1998, in 1999 were the best submarine in the Pacific Fleet. The truth is, two people on the submarine said, I cannot work for a captain who's not going to tell me what to do. And we helped them find a job where they could go do what they were told. And oddly enough, it was one senior officer and one senior chief, guys that you would expect would embrace this opportunity to have control over their own destiny. They were the two that we let them find a job where they weren't on the submarine. But for me, and one of the things I admire about David is he didn't fire anybody. He was given the authority to clean house, and he didn't clean house. It also taught me another principle, and that is you're never as bad as your reputation might say, because we weren't, and you're never as good as your reputation might say. And that ability to have some humility, I think, is an important characteristic in a leader that wants to grow more leaders.
I think this is related to the trust and respect our people. Knowing David and having these Friday meetings, I can feel it. This is in his DNA. It's not pretending, it's not playing. So I believe you also notice in him being a really respectful human toward other people. So this was, I think, fantastic experience. I believe. I have a from chatroom Agnieszka question: did everyone change behavior in the crew, or maybe some people stay with their habits and beliefs? How did those people cooperate with the rest who changed? Partially, you answered this question. Maybe you can add something. You want to add something?
Yeah, not everybody changed. In fact, we had, and Chuck already alluded to it, that both he and I were very good at yelling, talking down, and raising our voices, because that's what we had learned for so many years. And we did have a few guys that went on, even after that experience, that continued in that same mode. And we didn't lose a lot of sleep over them. You know, we made our investments in the people that were willing to take that psychological ownership and willing to take control of their jobs. And it wasn't 100% perfect on the changeover. And it wasn't about changing people, though. And that's, I think, where the confusion is. What did 100% change was the culture, the environment on the submarine. And we all knew that it was safe to share what we thought, was best. We knew it was safe to pursue excellence. We didn't have to worry about making a mistake, because when your focus is on being excellent, you make fewer mistakes, and that radically changed on the submarine.
Andy, you said that the role, first of all, is to change the culture and environment. I agree. On the other hand, by even asking these questions, what we have in the case of Rice, he was also developing, like, to, in time of a coaching or mentoring. Would you agree?
Yeah, for me, it was all about teaching the guys that work for me to be able to do my job. That was my purpose for existing, was to teach those guys to do my job and to teach Chuck's guys to be good commanding officers. And part of that was to teach him what sonar does and how it works on the ship and how it fits with everything else. And that was the time that was invested in my development by David is more than any other person in my work life. And so that was, and that changed my approach to investing in people. One of the things that used to make me laugh on the submarine is the naysayers, those guys that didn't want anything to do with it. They would be like, yeah, you're going to train these guys and then they're going to leave.
Right.
And my approach always was, well, what if I don't train them and they stay? It's crazy.
We have a questions from Beata. Hi, Beata. So my question was, what is the key success changing the leadership model? If you could pick up, I don't know, maybe one, maybe two basic key elements.
Andy?
My first approach would be to give control to your team members, but not without ensuring the competence and clarity is there. That's what got us to think. That's what shifted the psychological ownership. That was key. And the other key was the conversation, almost continual conversation between the workers and the supervisors and the captain. On almost all of my submarines before David, and I served on 7. David was the only captain that was constantly in the areas where the work was happening. Most of the officers that I worked for stayed in their office or their space. In fact, when I got out of the service, I went to work for an accounting firm, and the managing partner had the same approach. He stayed in his office. The staff never saw him. And one of the first things I encouraged him to do was to go out of his office and talk to the auditors, talk to the tax accountants. In fact, he and I started visiting the places where our teams were doing audits, and it radically changed the culture of that accounting firm. So those are the two most important things: give control and talk to your team.
Thank you, Andy. We have probably one of the last very interesting question. The question is, could you please share your thoughts on similarities and differences between accountability culture and Turquoise organization? Turquoise, what we mean is the based on the Frederic Laloux book, Reinventing Organization. In English could be teal or turquoise. So what we have Jacek Blikle, nice to have you, Jacek, here, who is a very big, promoter, if you wish, this turquoise organization in Poland, and having fantastic experience writing books about it. So if you could pick up, what's the difference between leader, what was on Santa Fe, and this teal organization, when you basically don't have a leader, I understand, or maybe have a different type of leaders?
Chuck, you want that one, or?
No, go ahead, Andy. Your perspective is probably better.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. So the stuff that I've read on the teal environment would only, in my opinion, would only work on a submarine if all 140 people had the same abilities and same experiences. what was incredibly empowering and freeing for us was the fact that we had the top of the organization, David, willing to provide the cover, if you will, when a mistake was made. It wasn't somebody else's fault. It wasn't somebody else's problem. I think on most submarines, the hierarchy looks like this. On ours, it looked like this because we were making decisions that other submarines, their team wasn't. And just in my position alone, I was signing for work and approving inspections that you had to be at Chuck's level to sign on another submarine. David flattened that. Chuck, what else do you want to add to that?
My perspective is everybody has different levels of competence and clarity. And that's from the amount of time you've been with the organization, from your different experiences that you have, from the positions that you have within an organization. And so there's a right place for decisions to be made in an organization. And so on the Santa Fe, there were things that my young sailors, that sailor can decide whether he wants to serve white rice or brown rice. There's at my chief's level, what days are we going to bring order, or what things are we going to bring on board? What types of food? What's the menu look like? And I left those decisions up to him. For me, it was about what days are we going to bring stores on? What levels are we doing? Because I had more clarity on what the ship's schedule was and what the other departments were doing and how that affected them. And then for David, there were decisions that he wanted to make. That his big thing, he gave the order to fire a weapon because he felt that's a big deal. You have the potential for taking life, and that was a decision that he wanted to make. So for me, there are decisions that need to be made. It's finding the right level that those decisions should be made. That is key, because there's lots of decisions that were supposed to be pushed up to the captain that really David didn't have visibility of it. David wasn't deeply involved in it. So why was he making the decision other than because he was the captain, or maybe because, well, I want to know that those things are happening? There's other mechanisms that you can do to fill that gap, but the decision should be made at a lower level. But there are decisions that should be made at the upper level. So for me, the flat organization is a little bit of a misnomer in that it's complicated because not everybody's experience and clarity is equivalent throughout an organization.
Yes, and each leader should have this atomic pusher or whatever, releaser for his or her competency. Chuck, Andy, I could go on like that for 1 more hour, but I am looking at our watch. Unfortunately, time is passing fast. We fully understand that within 1 hour it's difficult to give more details about the intent-based leadership. I can only tell you, after 27 years being in the business, pharmaceutical business, leading company for like 8 years, when I first heard the story of David, I was amazed. I was really amazed, because I believe this style of management is the answer for the VUCA world. It's the answer for the way we should lead people, we should lead companies. Therefore, if you are still hungry, I believe you might have this feeling, please join us. You saw in the link to the chat at least 2 those options. You might also read about our classes. We have a different activity, and we are doing it together with the partnership of Chuck, Andy, David, and the whole IBL Institute, because we believe this is the mission for leaders of now and for the future. Nowadays, for the future, this is fantastic opportunity. So please join us. And I want to say thank you very much to Andy, to Chuck, for being with us. Thank you for your inspiration, for your thoughts. And I am only hoping that when the pandemic is over, we could see you not online, but maybe we can host you in Poland on a meeting. So thank you very much, and please stay. All those who want to stay and to get some more information about our services, trainings, masterclass, will be for next few minutes to potentially talk with you. So thank you all of you for being with us.
Dzięki, Maciek.
Dzięki.
Thank you, Maciek.